Welcome to Broomtail country. In this episode, we're going to talk about a hypothetical. What if the closing of the American frontier led to the eugenics movement of the early 20th century? Without further ado, let's jump into the video. Alright, so this is a pretty loose hypothesis, a pretty loose theoretical. So I've been doing a lot of reading on eugenics. In fact, my master's degree, my final paper, is going to be on the eugenics movement of the early 20th century. And I came across an interesting idea in there. So back in the day, there was a historian named Frederick Jackson Turner. He proposed what is known as the frontier thesis. And basically, it said that America was pushing west to ease their social tensions. And if I got that wrong, just let me know, whatever. That's the gist of it. And what this means is that America has always had this social tension within, but because they had the vast frontier to their west, to the west of them, they were able to ease that social tension by pushing that way, by getting more land, by pushing people out. And what Turner proposes is that once they got all the way to California and the frontier was settled, they quelled all of the Native American rebellions, put them on reservations. The people of the United States started seeing an increase in social tensions. And my theoretical hypothesis, I haven't done too much research into this, is that that is one of the contributing factors, if you hold to that belief, that social tensions were eased by the frontier, by the settling of it. Social tensions in the United States grew in the early 20th century, so 1900 to like 1939, before World War II, grew to increasing proportions because people started running out of land, running out of money, running out of resources in the East, and the promise of the West no longer held its luster. So there was no outlet valve for the American citizen. And so how the eugenics movement comes out of this is that the eugenics movement is pretty much overtly racist, socioeconomical, and it's pretty much racist and socioeconomically based. There are some other factors, but that's for another day. And eugenics promises people that if they were to properly breed with each other, so have sex with people, and breed in superior genetics, this is kind of how this ties into this channel, breeds in superior genetics, kind of like livestock, then they could breed out different races, they could breed out socioeconomic problems, they could breed out crime, alcoholism, they could breed out mental problems with people. We saw in the early 20th century a rise in crime, alcoholism, violence in eastern cities. So the movement came in and said, well, the problem is that immigrants and African Americans they have these inferior genetics, and they are breeding with each other and they are just increasing. Meanwhile, the Nordic and the Anglo-Saxon are the ones who have the superior genetics, the ones who are not prone to crime, who are not prone to violence and alcoholism, and they have the superior skin color, apparently. And the movement promises that if people start sterilizing people with inferior genetics and they start promoting people with superior genetics breeding, then we will have another outlet. So everything was kind of based off of race and money. If you had money, you were pretty much considered superior. If you had white skin, you were considered superior. This was a promise to people that if they did this, life would get better in the cities. And so no longer could they turn to the West. They started looking inward. They started looking at their most intimate part of their life, sex. And the movement, this is where people they kind of dive off the deep end. One of the major players in the movement is Charles Davenport, and he was overtly racist. And another major player in the movement is Margaret Sanger. She is the one who pretty much spearheaded the birth control movement, and she was also overtly racist. She was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and her and Davenport and Henry Laughlin and so many different people. I mean, we're talking this stuff was sponsored by Carnegie Mellon and Rockefeller. This stuff came out of the frontier being closed and people's racist and biased ideas towards other people. It came out of that. And so you have people like Margaret Sanger, who spearheaded the birth control movement, who publicly pushed for sterilizations of minority groups, who advocated for birth control. People like that are knees deep in the eugenics movement. People like Charles Davenport, who said if you cross a white person with a black person, you would get a unnatural hybrid of a person, and it just wouldn't work out. You have people like Henry Laughlin, who testified before Congress in 1923, 1924 for the Immigration Act, saying that immigrants from Southern Europe and the Mediterranean were the ones causing all of the problems within the United States. And all these people created organizations that generally, other than Charles Davenport and the Eugenics Records Office and the American Breeders Association, those two are gone. But there are other organizations within the United States that have continued from that movement. And this is not a political statement. I'm not making claims like that. I'm just saying that their organizations have continued into the 21st century. The Rockefeller Foundation is still here. Carnegie Foundation is still here. Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood is still here. Now you tell me whether or not an organization's roots can affect the modern day. You see, things haven't changed, okay? The people that started these organizations were in the Ku Klux Klan. I don't know if Rockefeller and Carnegie were. These organizations are still around, and yet people still choose to believe in them. But let that speak for itself. Now, to tie it all back together, the frontier closed, the social valve was released, and people looked within themselves, within right here, and they said, I'm either superior or I'm inferior. You're either getting sterilized or you're forcing someone to get sterilized. People chose, if you were Anglo-Saxon and Nordic, you chose to sterilize people. If you were African American or Jewish or Italian per se, you were getting sterilized. Could you have advocated for positive eugenics, so increased breeding? And when I say breeding, I'm talking about making babies. This is just the language of the history. And if you were part of these minority groups, you advocated for positive eugenics. You wanted the best people with the best genetics to breed. And so eugenics movement, I believe, has never actually gone away. It's still here. Thanks for watching. I don't really have a plan of action for this. This is just some information that I will be writing my master's thesis on. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.